Welcome back for another deep dive with us. We're going to be talking about the last stages of a project today. That's closure and evaluation.
Okay.
We've got some notes and excerpts here from a university lecture all about project evaluation and appraisal. Um,
Sound dense.
yeah, it's interesting stuff, though.
Yeah.
You pour all this work into a project, your blood, sweat, and tears. How do you even know when it's actually finished? And even more importantly, how can you learn from what you just did to make your next project even better?
Yeah. Those are the big questions, right? It's funny how we tend to celebrate the start of a project, lots of fanfare, but the end can be kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, it is kind of like that feeling when you finish a really good book, like a mix of, oh, I'm so glad I finished that, but then also, well, what do I do now?
Right, right.
But before we get to that after party, we got to figure out how to actually get to the finish line first, right?
Yeah.
And our source material here jumps right into that, saying that not all projects end neatly.
Yeah, they don't. And right away, we've got 4 different project closure conditions thrown at us. We've got normal completion,
Okay.
which is, what we're all hoping for. But then there's premature, perpetual, and even failed projects.
Okay, so let's unpack those different endings then. Normal completion, I think I understand everything goes according to plan, you hit your goals, everyone gives each other high fives.
Right.
But what about this premature thing? That sounds a bit like you're giving up before you get to the finish line.
It doesn't have to be, though. Sometimes, things change,
Yeah.
and it just makes more sense to end a project early. Like maybe the market shifted or the technology you're using is obsolete now, or maybe the organization's priorities have just changed. The important thing is to recognize when continuing the project is actually doing more harm than good.
So you're saying it's more like a smart strategic decision and not just waving the white flag.
Exactly.
Okay, I got it. So then what about perpetual projects? The ones that seem to just drag on forever. Our source material uses the Berlin-Brandenburg airport as an example.
Oh, wow.
What a project that just wouldn't quit.
I know.
They started planning it way back in 1991, started construction in 2006, and after so many delays and setbacks, it finally opened in 2020.
That's almost 30 years, like
Yeah.
longer than some people's entire careers.
Yeah.
And it's a really good example of what can go wrong when a project's scope just keeps growing.
Uh-huh.
You run into these unforeseen technical issues,
Yeah.
and then you have all these external factors like politics and economics, just throwing wrenches in the works.
Yeah. This airport saga really highlights that these perpetual projects aren't just annoying, they can be super costly
Oh, yeah.
and even damaging to an organization's reputation. So
Yeah.
practically speaking, what can we learn from this cautionary tale?
Well, I think the most important thing is to define very clear endpoints from the get-go. Everyone needs to understand exactly what done means. But
Mm.
even beyond that, it's important to have good risk management processes in place.
Right.
So what are some potential roadblocks,
Yeah.
both internal and external, that could affect the project? And how can we, either mitigate those risks or at least have contingency plans ready?
So being able to adapt is just as important as having a good plan in the first place.
Totally.
Okay, so let's say we manage to avoid those pitfalls, becoming a perpetual project, and we're actually heading towards a successful completion. How do we officially wrap things up?
That's where the art of closure comes in. And it's not just as simple as saying we're done. We need to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yeah, our notes outline like a whole checklist of activities for closure, from getting the client to sign off to reassigning team members, archiving documents, and even, wait a minute, celebration.
Uh-huh.
Are we talking champagne and confetti here?
Well, recognizing achievements is definitely part of a healthy closure process. But even more important is the final report, which deserves its own spotlight.
Oh, so you're saying it's more than just like a dry summary of what we did.
Yeah, for sure. The final report is where you really capture the essence of the whole project, not just what happened, but why it happened. What were the initial goals? Did we meet them? What obstacles did we encounter? And how did we get past them? What did we learn along the way that can help us in the future?
It's almost like writing a memoir for the project. You're reflecting on its journey, extracting those lessons learned.
That's a great way to put it.
So it's not just about accountability then, it's about learning and improving as an organization. So future project teams can learn from what we did well and avoid making the same mistakes.
Exactly. And that brings up a good point that our source material mentions, which is the difference between a progress report and a formal project evaluation.
Okay.
Or sometimes they call it an audit. Why even make that distinction?
Yeah, why?
Well, a progress report is really just a snapshot of where we are right now, what we've done, what's still left to do. But a project evaluation takes a much wider view and examines the entire project lifecycle,
Okay.
from the very beginning, the selection process, to planning and execution, and then ultimately the outcomes.
So instead of just asking, did we deliver on time and within budget,
Mhm.
we're asking, was this even the right project to do in the first place?
Exactly. Did it align with our strategic goals?
Okay,
Did we use our resources effectively? Did we actually learn anything that we can apply to future projects?
got it. Now I see that our notes mention in process and post-project evaluations.
Yeah,
Is that like checking your map halfway through a road trip versus reflecting on the whole trip once you're back home?
I like that analogy.
Yeah,
In-process evaluations are about making adjustments as you go,
okay.
so you can catch problems early and make changes before they become huge issues.
Oh, so it's kind of like a project pit stop. Make sure
Mhm.
everything's running smoothly, tighten any loose bolts, and then get back on track.
Exactly.
But what about those post-project evaluations? What makes those valuable?
Well, post-project evaluations give you a more complete picture. You have the benefit of hindsight,
Yeah.
so you can see the big picture. Connect the dots, identify patterns that you might not have noticed while you were in the thick of things.
Kind of like that aha moment you get when you finally finish a really tough puzzle. Suddenly, all the pieces make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And these post-project evaluations are really useful for organizational learning. They help you figure out the best practices, spot areas for improvement, and come up with strategies for tackling similar projects in the future.
So every project kind of becomes a stepping stone to doing things better.
That's the idea. It's all about creating a culture of continuous learning and improvement.
I like that a lot. But let's get practical for a second. Our source material mentions that how deep you go with a project evaluation can really vary depending on a few things. What are those things? How do they affect how we approach it?
Well, one size doesn't fit all, right? So things like how big and complex the project is, the risks involved, and even the organization's culture and the resources they have.
Yeah.
All those things matter.
So I'm guessing a small internal project wouldn't need the same level of scrutiny as, say, launching a whole new product line or building a skyscraper.
Exactly. For a small, low-risk project, maybe you just get feedback from the team and the people involved, document your lessons learned, and then move on.
Okay.
But for a huge, high-stakes project, you probably want a much more thorough evaluation. Maybe even bring in some outside experts for an unbiased perspective.
Oh, okay.
The key is to tailor your approach to the specific needs of the project.
So finding a balance between thoroughness and efficiency, make sure we're getting those insights without getting bogged down in unnecessary bureaucracy.
Right. And speaking of finding balance, we need to address the human element. That's evaluating team and individual performance.
Right.
How do we fairly and constructively assess everyone's contributions, especially when a project hasn't gone perfectly?
Yeah, that's where things can get a bit tricky. You don't want to create a blame culture, but at the same time, you need to figure out what to improve,
Right.
right? Our source material really emphasizes getting feedback from the team members themselves. How did they feel about their own work and how the team functioned?
Yeah, self-reflection is very valuable. It helps people see their strengths and weaknesses, and it makes them feel more responsible for the results of the project, good or bad.
Okay. But how do we create an environment where people feel safe giving honest feedback?
Right.
Especially if there were conflicts or challenges during the project. You know, I've heard of using anonymous feedback, especially when there are power dynamics involved.
Yeah, anonymity can be helpful. It lets people share their views without fear, which can bring up issues that might otherwise be ignored.
And our notes also mention something called 360-degree assessments for project managers.
Oh, right.
That's where they get feedback from their bosses, their team, and even their peers.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
360 assessments can be great, but they need to be done carefully.
What do you mean?
Well, the focus should always be on growth and development,
Yeah.
helping project managers understand what they do well and where they can improve their skills and their leadership style.
So it's less about giving grades and more about fostering a learning environment.
Exactly. And it's also super important to ensure that the feedback is constructive and actionable. It's not enough to just point out problems. We need to help project managers actually come up with ways to address those challenges.
It makes sense, but I can't help but wonder, how do we capture those lessons learned in a way that's both meaningful and useful? Everyone talks about learning from experience, but how do we actually do it effectively?
Well, that's where the magic of project retrospectives comes in.
Ooh, tell me more. Our source material only mentions them briefly, so I'm really interested to hear more about how they work and why they're so valuable.
Retrospectives are all about bringing the team together once a project has ended
Okay.
to reflect on what happened, to figure out what went well, what could have been better, and extract those precious lessons learned.
Sounds like a great way to take even the toughest projects and turn them into opportunities to grow.
Yeah,
But are there any pitfalls we should watch out for?
of course there are. Some common challenges can turn a retrospective into a blame game instead of a productive learning experience. And I think you'll find that our source material does a good job of outlining some of these potential pitfalls.
Okay, let's dig into those pitfalls then, and more importantly, how to avoid them.
Sounds good.
But first, let's take a moment to let all this information sink in. We'll be back in a flash for part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into project closure and evaluation. Right before the break, we were getting into those project retrospectives. You mentioned that there can be some problems when you're doing these post-project reflections. So what are those pitfalls, and how can we avoid turning it into just pointing fingers at each other?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance to
Yeah.
strike, you know? We want to encourage honest feedback, but we also want to create a space where everyone feels safe to share their thoughts without worrying about being punished for it.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things to watch out for is that retrospectives can very easily become these blame sessions,
Yeah.
especially if the project didn't go well.
Right.
It's human nature to want to find someone to blame when things go wrong.
Yeah.
But how do we shift the focus from pointing fingers to learning from the experience?
Yeah. How?
Well, our source material mentions a few strategies. Like, one of them is to frame the retrospective around specific events or decisions rather than individual people.
Oh, okay. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, why did you do X, which, could sound like you're
Yeah.
accusing someone,
Right.
you could ask, what factors led to decision X?
Okay.
This kind of encourages everyone to look at the situation objectively and to figure out what systemic issues might have been at play,
Oh.
rather than just blaming someone.
Right. So it's not about judging the outcome. It's more about understanding why decisions were made.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I got it. Are there any other techniques you found to be helpful in making retrospectives more productive?
Another really good approach is to start by focusing on what went well.
Oh, okay.
Begin the meeting by asking, what are we proud of?
Right.
This sets a positive tone right from the start. Like, it's a celebration of what we learned, not a postmortem.
Right, like setting the tone for a celebration of learning rather than a postmortem.
Exactly. And then after you've talked about the successes, then you can move on to what could be improved.
Uh-huh.
But frame the discussion around what could we do differently next time, not, what did we do wrong?
I like that. So it's all about taking those mistakes and turning them into lessons for next time.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Our source material also mentions that it's good to have someone independent leading the retrospective, like a facilitator.
Right.
Why is that so important? Wouldn't it be okay to just have the project manager run the meeting?
Well, having an independent facilitator can really change the dynamic. Someone coming in with a fresh perspective
Mhm.
can make sure everyone's voice is heard, and they can keep the conversation neutral and on track. So it doesn't get sidetracked or bogged down in negative stuff.
Oh, so they're like the referee, making sure everyone plays fair and the discussion stays constructive.
Exactly. And a good facilitator can also help the team translate what they've learned into action steps
Okay.
for future projects.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just say, oh, we should have done this differently. You need to actually come up with ways to implement those changes.
So taking those aha moments and turning them into concrete changes. Got it. Now, switching gears a little bit, our source material also talks about the role of AI in project management,
Right.
particularly in these final stages, closure and evaluation. What are your thoughts on that? What are some of the potential advantages and challenges of having AI involved?
Well, AI is changing so many industries, and project management is no exception. It's about to be revolutionized by it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about closure and evaluation, the potential benefits are huge.
Okay.
Just imagine a tool that could analyze all your project documents, like automatically
Right.
find the important trends and patterns, and then create detailed reports with actionable recommendations.
That would be a dream come true. No more spending hours going through emails, meeting notes, and spreadsheets trying to figure out what happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
AI can handle those boring tasks, so we can focus on the strategic thinking.
Right. Right.
And it's not just about automation. AI can also spot potential risks and problems
Mm-hmm.
before they turn into big disasters.
Oh.
By analyzing data from past projects, these AI algorithms can pick up on patterns and red flags that might mean a project is going off track.
So it's like having an early warning system, to help us correct things before it's too late.
Exactly. And as AI gets even better, we can expect to see even more advanced uses for it. Imagine a system that could analyze how teams communicate, spot potential conflicts or communication breakdowns,
Okay.
and then suggest ways to improve how the team works together.
Wow, that would be so valuable. It'd be like having an AI coach
Yeah.
to optimize how the team performs and prevent those interpersonal issues that can derail a project. But with all this potential, are there any drawbacks or challenges to consider when we're using AI for project closure and evaluation?
Of course. Every new technology comes with its own set of challenges.
Yeah.
One thing to think about is data privacy and security.
Right.
AI needs a lot of data to work,
Yeah.
and it's super important that that data is collected, stored, and used in a responsible way.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be careful about the ethics of using AI to analyze sensitive information,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to personal data about team members.
That's a really good point. We don't want to give up our privacy and security just for efficiency.
Yeah.
What else should we be thinking about as we enter this new world of AI-powered project management?
Another thing to watch out for is bias. You see, AI algorithms are only as good as the data they learn from.
Yeah.
So if that data is biased, the AI system is going to perpetuate those biases. Like, let's say an AI tool is trained on data from projects that were mostly led by men.
Okay.
It might then unconsciously favor male candidates when it's making suggestions for who should lead projects in the future.
So it's not enough to just adopt the technology. We have to be aware of its limits and potential problems. We need to use AI in a responsible and ethical way, making sure it's helping us and not creating new problems or making existing inequalities worse.
I agree. And it's really important to remember that AI is just a tool. It's not a replacement for human judgment.
Right.
We still need skilled project managers who can understand data, make decisions, and deal with the complexities of human interactions. AI can make us better, but it can't replace the human element, which is so important for successful projects.
It's fascinating to think about how project management is going to change as AI becomes more integrated into our workflows. It's exciting, but also a bit scary. But I think you've raised some important things to consider, which will help us make this transition in a thoughtful and responsible way. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to go back to the Berlin-Brandenburg Airport project we talked about earlier.
Okay.
It's a great example of a project that went wrong, but I'm wondering if there are any valuable lessons we can take from it. What do you think?
The Berlin-Brandenburg Airport project is full of lessons, things to avoid, and strategies that can help us reduce risks and navigate complex projects. Like, one big takeaway is how important it is to clearly define what the project is supposed to achieve right from the beginning,
Right.
and to have a strong process for managing changes, because those inevitable scope creeps can plague big projects.
That's a great point. The airport project had constant scope expansions and changing requirements, and that really contributed to the delays and cost overruns.
Yeah.
What other lessons can we take away from this cautionary tale?
Another important lesson is that you have to thoroughly assess risks and have backup plans ready. The airport project hit a lot of unexpected problems, from technical issues to political roadblocks, and many of these could have been predicted and handled
Yeah.
if they had better risk management strategies.
It sounds like they were caught off guard by those unknown unknowns, those problems that you just don't see coming.
Right, exactly. And while you can't plan for every single problem,
Right.
having a culture of proactive risk management can really reduce the chances of those unexpected roadblocks completely derailing a project.
So it's not just about planning for what we think might go wrong. It's also about being flexible enough to deal with those surprises.
Exactly. The Berlin-Brandenburg Airport project also shows us how important it is to have clear communication and collaboration among everyone involved, from the government officials and contractors to the public.
Yeah.
The project had breakdowns in communication and conflicting interests, and this made the delays and cost overruns even worse.
It reminds us that even the most technically advanced projects can fail
Yeah,
if there's poor communication and a lack of alignment among the key stakeholders.
absolutely.
So clear communication, thorough risk management, and a solid change management process. Those are some key takeaways from the Berlin-Brandenburg Airport saga. Anything else to add to our toolbox?
One last thing I want to emphasize is the importance of learning from our mistakes. The Berlin-Brandenburg Airport project was a big failure.
Right.
It was costly and embarrassing, But it also taught us a lot that we can use to improve future infrastructure projects and avoid making the same mistakes.
Okay.
It's super important to document those lessons and share them with everyone
Yeah.
so others can benefit from those hard-earned insights.
It's all about turning failures into chances to grow and improve.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've learned some really important things from looking at the Berlin-Brandenburg Airport project.
I think so too.
It shows that even the biggest projects can hit unexpected problems. But with good planning, clear communication, and a commitment to learning, we can improve our chances of success and even turn those setbacks into stepping stones towards doing things better and more effectively. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, I think it's a good time to take a moment to gather our thoughts and get ready for our final thoughts on this whole topic of project closure and evaluation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent this whole time digging into the nitty-gritty of wrapping up projects and figuring out how to learn from them. Even took a little side trip to examine the trials and tribulations of the Berlin-Brandenburg Airport.
Yeah, we have. From the various ways a project can end to the importance of figuring out what we can learn and the amazing possibilities of using AI to change how we do things.
Before we send you off to tackle your next big project, let's just crystallize some of those key things we've talked about. What are those golden nuggets you hope people will take away from listening to this?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that finishing a project isn't just about checking boxes and getting signatures on the deliverables.
It's not just about putting up a banner that says mission accomplished and then walking away, right?
Right. It's more about making sure the transition is smooth, tying up loose ends, and setting ourselves up for success in the future.
And acknowledging that not all projects have a grand finale, right?
Yeah, some of them end early, some get delayed forever, and some just fail. We need to understand these different endings and change our approach accordingly.
So being flexible and being able to adapt is just as important in the final stages as it is during the project itself.
Totally.
Another big takeaway is that evaluating a project isn't just about saying if it was a success or a failure.
No, it's about looking at the whole project from start to finish and finding both the things we did well and the things we could have done better.
It's about digging for those lessons, those little bits of wisdom that can help us do things better and avoid repeating mistakes.
And remember, capturing those lessons isn't just about writing a boring final report. It's about getting the whole team involved and really reflecting on what happened through those project retrospectives.
Those retrospectives, when done right, can be super valuable for creating a culture where we're always learning and improving. But like we talked about, there are some things to watch out for.
Yeah, we got to create an environment where people feel safe giving honest feedback. The conversation needs to be about learning and growing, not about placing blame.
Right, and having someone skilled and independent leading the retrospective can make a huge difference. It helps the team navigate those potentially tough conversations and come out with some real action items.
Absolutely.
And looking ahead, it's clear that AI is going to play a bigger and bigger role in how we manage projects.
It is.
From automating those tedious tasks to giving us predictive insights, AI has the potential to change everything about how we close out projects and evaluate them.
It does.
It's pretty exciting to think about how these AI tools can help us analyze data, find patterns, and generate reports with a level of detail and understanding that we as humans just couldn't do on our own.
It is pretty incredible, but as we embrace the power of AI, we have to remember that it has its limitations and potential biases.
Yeah, we have to make sure we're using it responsibly and ethically, always putting humans at the center of our decision-making.
Exactly right.
So, as we wrap up our exploration of project closure and evaluation, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Oh, I like this.
Think back to one of your own projects, maybe one that didn't go as smoothly as you hoped, one where you learned a lot. Now imagine looking at that project again with everything we've talked about today. What new things might you see? What lessons could you learn now that you didn't see back then?
It's crazy how looking back at things with a fresh perspective can reveal so much. It's like one of those optical illusions where you see one image and then suddenly you see something completely different when you shift your focus.
Exactly. There's always something new to learn, some new understanding to be gained, if we're just willing to look with an open mind and a desire to know more.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into project closure and evaluation. We hope you've picked up some valuable tips and that you're feeling inspired to approach your next project with a fresh perspective and a dedication to always learning and improving.
Thanks for being here. Until next time.